The protest. It was one of those grey, dismal February days when there was hardly any chance of the sun putting in a guest appearance. Not in central London, anyway. Luke and Jessica Crichton, JC as she was known, were in the back seat of a Mercedes S-Class, the classic London limo, on their way to one of the most important events in the 2019 London Fashion Week, in the ballroom of one of Park Lane's most famous hotels. JC, an ex-supermodel turned influencer and climate activist, was shrouded in a huge and obviously fake fur coat, but sporting a real and incredibly expensive pair of Christian Louboutin heels. And little else. She was nervous in a way she had not experienced since her early days of top shows in Paris and Milan. Her stomach felt hollow, and maybe the big line of coke she had snorted earlier had not been the best idea. Almost too pumped, she had no last-minute reservations, riding the wave of massive confidence and almost sexual tension. She reached across to briefly grasp Luke's hand and give him one of her best smiles. But in reality, she was the one who needed reassurance. Luke seemed his usual cool self, as if emotion never got to him, but he returned her smile, and that made her feel a little better. "I'm going to do this, and the whole world will see it." She kept repeating this mantra to herself. Luke, as JC knew him, was looking unusually dapper in a single-breasted grey suit and crisp white shirt, with no tie, both of which might have done credit to Jermyn Street. JC had first met Luke in his undercover role as another climate activist at the Extinction Rebellion, XR for short. "Wow, Luke, you look half decent for once," JC said, then carried on with, "Keep dressing up like that, and I could almost fancy you." Something seemed different to the Luke she had become used to over the last few weeks. That Luke was a bit scruffy, a little withdrawn, and feigned a London accent that at times seemed put on. This Luke was smart, confident, like someone used to being in command. She much preferred this version, but which was the real one? So, JC teased Luke, asking where he had suddenly acquired such dress sense and quality swag, as if by magic. His shoes, too, were lace-up, black and elegant, quite out of character, compared to his normal, cheap-looking sneakers. But she put those thoughts aside for the moment as her mission neared. "Remember, Luke," JC said, "once I have done my thing, you have to get me out fast. I don't want to spend the evening in Vine Street Police Station being grilled by grubby policemen and then dragged into court the next morning. Rather looking forward to appearing on one of the breakfast news chat shows my agent has already lined up for me." With that, Luke held JC's stare for a moment and nodded. The confidence JC exuded was not entirely convincing, but like any of his past military missions, he had planned infiltration, execution, and extraction. The first was easy, as long as JC was allowed to keep her fur. The second was quite straightforward, as it would take all by surprise, and looking around, he saw only a few stewards around the room, more to sort out seating disputes than to provide security. With that thought uppermost in his mind, they were guided to their seats at the end of the catwalk, JC acknowledging some friendly waves from the fashion industry aficionados. Luke had assumed that the private security team policing the event would be slow to react, and possibly might think it was all part of the show. Extraction was much trickier, though. Fighting their way through a panicked crowd was not the best option, and some of the crowd might try to confront JC, angry at her spoiling their evening. He went through his options on the latter, and none of them were foolproof. "Too late now," he thought. "Let's give it a go." JC seemed ice cool, and if she had last-minute misgivings, she was not showing them. The fashion show kicked in, and with techno music blaring, the first model emerged to strut her stuff down the catwalk, which virtually dissected the large salon. The model was wearing little more than a feather boa and some minimal underwear, just a G-string really. Clearly sent in first to titillate the audience, her scant attire and gold-painted breasts did that most effectively, all in the name of art and design, naturally. Before she turned to strut back and yield to the next leggy model, JC was already prancing towards her from the beginning of the catwalk. In her fake fur and high heels, she was instantly recognizable to many in the audience and drew some spontaneous clapping, as befitting her celebrity status. There was an expectation that she would whip off the cheap fake fur shortly to reveal more art and design beneath it. She did not disappoint. The fake fur was flung off the catwalk where Luke was waiting to catch it. She was nude, but all over her body she appeared to be tattooed with the letters XR, which designated the infamous climate activist movement, the Extinction Rebellion. Then she placed several small glass phials onto the end of the ramp and flamboyantly crushed them under her very high heels. This was not as easy as she expected, but she experienced a helpful rush of adrenaline and managed to kick the fractured phials into the gangway around the catwalk. The audience thought this was all part of the show, though some of them had worked out that the XR markings were the same as they had seen recently on the news about protesters disrupting the London tube services. The interest in JC's antics soon turned to near panic, as she had in fact cracked open 4 powerful stink bombs. Their noxious odor was now starting to work its way through the front rows. JC gave a cheerful wave, with a confidence mainly due to the lines of coke she had an hour earlier. She felt as if she was flying, and even posed once more for the press cameras before jumping down into Luke's waiting arms, wrapping herself in that memorable fur coat. The coat was to become internationally famous, because once the press had correctly identified it as an up-and-coming designer fake fur special, every single one Marks & Spencer had in stock sold out in a few hours. It gained its own instant celebrity status and, for a short time, was more desirable than the latest Hermes bag. Luke had scouted the extraction route and figured that a fire exit door next to the rear of the salon would be the best bet for a quick way out. It had to be unlocked, being a fire exit, and from there, a corridor would take them to the service stairs leading to the external door on a side street where they had their Mercedes limo waiting for a quick getaway. Should be quick and easy, he had thought, but wrongly this time, as what he had not counted on were the 2 beefy-looking security guys standing on the far side of the salon door. They were part of the hotel's security detail and had not been there when he scouted the route earlier. Their main job was to stop anyone coming or going through that entrance, while keeping it open for emergencies. As he pushed an overexcited JC ahead of him through the door, he was watching for pursuit from the salon. But then, 2 beefy guys blocked their path. "Sorry, sir and madam, you cannot use this exit," the guard said, then, with a surprised expression, opened his mouth and the words came out. "What the fuck? Tigger? Sorry, Major? Sir, I did not know you were on the personal protection circuit. And what a lovely client you have. Would not mind protecting her myself." Shit, Luke thought. The last thing he needed was his cover as Luke to be blown. But he may have had a stroke of luck. Ex-Sergeant Reginald Bates and his colleague were both members of Luke's old squad, the SAS, known as the Regiment, where he was known to most as Tigger, or formerly as Major Brown. "Carry on, Sergeant," Luke said. "Seems to be a spot of bother inside. There's a bit of a stink, so we are leaving by the back door." Bates, not the brightest but always obedient, looked bemused and stood back to let his former officer walk past them. He then caught a whiff of the acrid smell of bad eggs and understood his services were needed inside the salon. JC was still on a high, adrenaline coursing through her veins, amplifying the effect of the coke. In this mood, she would have loved to have dragged Luke to one of the hotel's best suites and shown him her wild side. Maybe he had one too, and she would love to find out. He always seemed to be holding something back, and now she was surer than ever he was not a simple, unemployed oil drilling engineer. She clutched his arm possessively in the back of the Mercedes as it headed towards her Russian boyfriend's Belgravia mansion. As they pulled up in front of the impressive Palladio-style entrance, she gave Luke a fierce kiss, full on the lips, and said, "You were amazing, protecting me the whole time." She thought that this shared mission had brought them closer together. There was something very attractive about the quiet confidence he projected, as if nothing could go wrong. It made her feel safe and secure, in a way she had not felt since a young child in her father's arms. Luke nearly replied that he was just doing his job, but he thought that sounded a bit lame, so he muttered, "Take care. See you tomorrow." Not much better, but all he could come up with. He watched from the back of the Mercedes as she climbed the steps to the front door, which opened as if by magic to admit her. Then he signaled to the limo driver to take him back to his tiny studio apartment in Camden. Bit of a letdown after all that excitement, but there was always another day, and their mission had gone perfectly to plan. Not exactly the kind of mission he had experienced during his time with the regiment, but infinitely better than being desk-bound at MI6.